everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm actually not facing terrorism charges, but Richard's over here as have others in this room, which just shows you the kind of state of affairs that we are in as pro-Palestine activists in this country. Just to give an overview of Palestine Action, for those of you who don't know, we are a direct action network, and our main target has been Elbit Systems for many years, since 2020. And this is Israel's biggest weapons manufacturer. And they have been so crucial to the ongoing genocide, to arming the ongoing genocide and developing new weaponry through the ongoing massacres and bombing of the Palestinian people. This is something that the Israeli arms industry often does. They use Gaza and Palestinians as a laboratory to test out weaponry upon them so that they can sell it to our government, build them over here, and this is what's going on right as we speak. There was an investors meeting by Elbit's CEO, and it was in Israel, and are often a bit more open about how evil they are when they are over in Israel and not over in England. And it was translated, and you could hear them talking about how whenever they make contracts with new countries, they will say to these new countries that these weapons will first be tested with the Israeli military. And in one of the videos they played, they showed the workers in Israel, in Elbit Israel, saying that they felt like civil soldiers because they were working around the clock to provide the munitions that were needed, because the demand had obviously increased for these munitions because they were using so much currently in Gaza. So this is the kind of main company that we have been fighting against for a long time, and their factories and offices across this country. Now, obviously, since October 7th, there has been quite a significant increase in our direct actions against these companies. And Sharon Graham, head of Unite and everyone's best friend in this room, came out with a statement actually in March, and she's attacked people who were shutting down these weapons factories, and said that activists were targeting the workplaces of her members, and that it was their job to put the interests of their members first. Well, first of all, their members voted to boycott Israel significantly before October 7th. Second of all, this kind of rhetoric to put their members first, the jobs of their members first, above the lives of Palestinians, is rooted in racism and dehumanization of the Palestinian people. One Palestinian child is worth more than all of these factories, the whole presence of Elbit Systems put together, because you cannot put a value on human life. We wouldn't even have the same conversation or be hearing the same statements if it was white people being genocided right now. But this is a kind of rhetoric coming out from the Unite leader, and it's disgusting, to be honest with you. And she also accused people of targeting the workers in these places. And I have to say, our main tactic is to shut down these places before the workers get to work in the first place, because we don't want them making weapons to massacre the Palestinian people and are tested on the backs of the Palestinian people as well. But, you know, Mick, you referred to something before about the Rolls Royce, and actually the power of what workers could do if they chose to, right? Which is, rather than they can grind the production of these weapons to a halt overnight if they chose to. That is the power that these unions have. Unfortunately, though, to date, that hasn't been done. But that's why it takes ordinary people to go out and shut down these factories to stop them being able to make those parts to kill the Palestinian people. And that will always have to come first. But also, these factories, and we've heard this, probably heard this before, that a lot of these factories could make stuff that was good for humanity, not that was destroying humanity and destroying the Palestinian people. And we have an example of this in Elbit's factory in Tamworth. So Elbit, one of Elbit's factories was in a town called Tamworth, Staffordshire. And people from Palestine Action had repeatedly occupied the roof of this factory, and every time they had done quite significant damage to the site. And one of the last actions there, the security guards took the tools off the activists. And so the activists used their bare hands to rip out the roof tiles one by one. And thankfully it rained as well that day. And so after they got arrested, it was raining into the building and they destroyed a lot of the machinery inside of that building. And after this and a few more actions, the factory was forced to shut down for a few months and they rebuilt the whole site. They had to rebuild the roof, they had to rebuild all of the security, and they ended up spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on security costs. And obviously on top of that was lost production costs over these last few months. And they got to a point where they were forced to sell the site. And the new owners came in and actually wrote to Palestine Action to confirm that they're no longer going to have anything to do with Elbit. They're not going to have anything to do with Israel. And rather than make parts for Israeli tanks, which is what they were doing before, they are now making parts for public transport. And I do want to give an example of a good trade union, because we do have one. And that is, so we had, there's another Elbit factory in Leicester. Unfortunately, they're still there, so we're still working on that one. And in 2021, 4 activists, I don't know if you remember, but Gaza was being bombed in May 2021. And 4 activists went onto the roof of the Leicester factory. And in response, there were hundreds of people from the local community coming outside that factory day after day. And in total, they occupied the site for 6 days. And while they were up on the roof, actually, they ran out of water because they didn't expect to be up there for that long. And locals were throwing up bottles of water to them on the roof. And the police were arresting locals, but they still kept trying to get them water. And they actually resorted to drinking rainwater just so that they could stay there and shut down that factory for as long as possible, water that they collected off the tents. And one of the reasons they could stay up there for so long was because when the fire service was called, the fire brigade union intervened and called the local brand and said, do not remove those activists from that roof. And they said that we stand, and they issued a statement saying, we stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. It is not our role to remove protesters from the roof of these buildings. And that contributed to closing that factory down for significantly longer than if they had assisted the police in removing those activists. But I think what was so important about that action was it showed that not only did the activists take direct action, the fire service took direct action by refusing to remove them from the roof. And then when the police did try and remove the activists after 6 days, the local community chained up the gates and put themselves in the way and put their cars in the way and blocked the police for 7 hours from removing these activists and taking them to the police station. And eventually, when they managed to, get through, 30 cars from the local community followed the vans with the activists inside to the station. And recently, it takes a few years for these things to go to court, as you can imagine. Recently, I think it was in May this year, they went to court and the activists were found not guilty. Which just shows, as it's been mentioned before, there has been a significant move by the state to try and repress Palestine Action. And part of that, which a lot has come after the Israeli embassy, we uncovered that the Israeli embassy was lobbying the Attorney General's office, and they were discussing the defences that Palestine Action use in our court cases. Defences like our actions are proportional to what this company is doing, that we are preventing the greater crime, and that we're acting to save lives. And in response, the state has tried to make it very difficult to rely on these defences. But nevertheless, some judges and in some courts they have been allowed, and the Leicester case was an example of when a judge did allow activists to rely on the defence of necessity, acting to save lives, and as a result, they were successful and they won their case. But currently, we have 16 Palestine Action political prisoners. And that has significantly increased in the past month. It's gone from 1 to 16 in a matter of weeks. And these people are all imprisoned for essentially trying to stop a genocide. And it's an example, and it further highlights just how complicit the British state is in the genocide of Palestinians. And it also should show the British public that the state prioritises the military interests of a foreign genocidal entity over the rights and freedoms of its own citizens. And what they're doing to Palestine Action, and what they're doing by arresting people under this terrorism act, is an example to all of us of how far the state will go in order to protect the Zionist regime. We had 10 people, 11 of those activists who are being imprisoned are held on remand, and 5, as was mentioned before, have been imprisoned in Scotland. And actually that was relatively extreme for Scotland, I think, to imprison people like that. And I believe that they pull in an appeal, so hopefully that will be heard relatively soon. 10 people, 6 people, a few weeks ago, broke into Elbit's Bilton site. So this is Elbit's brand new research, manufacturing and development hub. They opened it last year, and they opened it with the UK Israeli ambassador came to open the site, had a nice ceremony. The CEO from Israel came down to the site as well, the one I spoke of before, in order to open this facility. Now, because they knew Palestine Action was out to get them, they had built lots of security fences, had hired lots of security guards to protect this site. Nevertheless, activists managed to drive a modified prison van through the fences into the building, and they managed to smash the drones inside of that building. And they found inside that building the same model of quadcopter drones as you may have seen being used in Gaza, the ones that are mimicking the sounds of women and children crying in order to lure Palestinians near to the drone so that they can kill them. That's what they found, that's what they destroyed. And as a result, the state arrested the 6 and then held them up to 36 hours. You're normally held for 24 hours without charge. You can then be held for another 12 hours if they get an extension. And this time, rather than charge them and take them to court and try and put them in prison, as has been the usual protocol, they rearrested them under the Terrorism Act so that they could hold them for another 7 days without charge. They held them in solitary confinement and interrogated them day after day. 4 others from across the country were rounded up, and in one story we know this because one of the friends of this person was arrested at the scene and de-arrested straight away. He was house sitting for his cousin in Yorkshire, and armed police with balaclavas surrounded his house, and he said, "I'm coming out, I'm not armed, put your guns down." And he had his hands up in the air, and they refused to put their guns down, and they arrested him with 4 guns pointing at his head. And he was taken down to London and has now been remanded. So in total, we call them now the Bilton 10, all of them have been put in prison. And after being detained under the Terrorism Act for a week, none of them were charged with terrorism offences. So it just shows that the state was just deliberately trying to use this to intimidate people, to put them through extremely stressful situations. We often, as activists, we're prepared to put our liberty on the line. We're prepared to go through these things, and obviously we have to remember the torture, the literal torture the Palestinians are going through. But the state now, by using these kind of powers, this is the furthest they can go. They're putting people in prison and they're trying to hold them under solitary confinement. They're trying to intimidate people as much as possible and intimidate the movement into stopping their actions. But to be honest, what they have shown is how scared the state is and how scared Israel's weapons trade is of Palestine Action, of the growing movement, and the fact that we refuse to stop and we refuse to surrender, and then we're going to keep going for them. We know Elbit, there's a guy called John Woodcock, Lord Wolney, and he keeps writing about us and he keeps asking for us to be banned, and he's funded by the Israel lobby and the arms industry. And he did a report, and in the report he discusses his meetings with Elbit, and Elbit complained to him of the detrimental impact that we were having on their business in England. And to be honest, I'm glad that they said that, and I'm glad that he reported it, because we know that we're winning, and we know that at moments like this, when they're doing everything to stop you, when you don't stop, when you continue to fight, continue to rise up, that is when you win. And now we know we are closer to victory than ever before, and we will chase Albert out of this country.